This is Francis Seeley from GlobalNet 21, and I'd like to invite you to this live stream tonight that we're doing on Facebook Live. We're doing this because we decided that what we'd like to do in Enfield Voices and GlobalNet and so on, series of interviews of interesting people who've done a lot to make a difference in the society and the communities in which they live. And we're doing it because we use a piece of software that we described when we did a Facebook Live last night called Be Live. And that allows us to do interviews and have another person on the screen. Normally you can't do that, but now you can. So if you look here now, we've got Ros Lucas, who is going to join us, and I'll introduce her in a minute. You can see her there in full screen. But it means that by doing this and using this particular piece of software, we can do these interviews, and that really is fantastic. And you can join in. You can actually put comments in, which is great. We did that last night, and if you are on the Enfield Live's Facebook site, if you type a comment in, then it will come up on the site itself. So, for example, I type nerd. Yeah, I can show it to you now. So that comes up, and if any of you want to type anything in, it could be a question, it could be a comment, I can put that to Ros. You don't have to, but you can. Looking at the sites that we're sharing this streaming program with, then you probably, you can still type in the comments box, but it won't necessarily go up on the the dashboard, so I won't be able to bring it up like that. I think you'd have to be on the Enfield Voices group to do that, which is the group that we're directly streaming this to. Anyhow, that's the background. And as I said, I'm Francis Seeley, and I come from GlobalNet 21. And in GlobalNet 21, we do a lot of interesting things and get involved in a lot of activities. And in this particular, we're going to talk to Ros Lucas, because Ros has been a community activist, and we're going to talk to her about why she's done that and what she in fact has done. Anyhow, Ros, thank you for joining us here. Maybe you can start by telling us why you have been a community activist for the length of time that you have been. What led you to community activity, and do you want to tell us your story?
First of all, I'd like to say that I don't see myself as an activist. I see myself more of an actionist, that if you don't like what's happening, try to do something about it. And I think it all started years ago when I met a guy named Tony Gibson, and I volunteered to help him do some work, typing his books. And the first one we did was on schools in Norfolk, when he was trying to change teachers' attitudes. And from there, the work that he did, working with teachers in the classroom to help them become more proactive, was a project called Living Space, where they were trying to see, they worked with small houses and plots, a bit like a Monopoly game, and they tried to see ways in which they could change their environment to somehow that they would like. The things that they didn't like, they would like to change. And through this work, the teachers suddenly realised that they were more engaged, more motivated, and wanted to stay on instead of going out at break and things like this. From there, this moved on to Tony Gibson's involvement in communities and neighbourhoods, where he thought the same sort of thing could help people who lived in tower blocks and in social housing, as we call it today. And it empowered them to make changes that they wanted, rather than trying to wait for people to come and do things for them. They wanted to find ways they could help themselves. And they found that people had many more skills than they really thought they had, and they could get on and do things. Over the years, we've seen where people have worked on council estates, and they've done things in the community that really worked. And I think this is where it all stemmed from. The part I've played in this was when I was teaching, and we tried to involve people in the community of school We did pubs at the weekend in Trent Park and badminton and things like this. I then became a teacher myself when my children started school. I did my first degree at Trent Park, and then I worked in secondary education, and I taught English and business. And part of that was helping youngsters. I became an enterprise event person. So business and getting people to work together in the community and doing something for themselves has always been there. And when I left teaching...
So what was your main interest when you got involved with Tony Gibson, who did a lot of things? We know, planning for real fact banks. He was a tremendous person. What you did that really interested you? Was it education? Was that the main sort of inspiration for you, or was it the community in which you lived?
I think because I was in education that the initial reaction was my involvement in education, because I think it's from the beginning that it is through education that we can change things.
So when you finished working with Tony and you sort of were flying solo and you wanted to get involved with your community, how did you start? What did you do? What was the first thing you did? And did you find it difficult to start? Did you know what to do? Was it sort of a struggle to begin with?
I think, having been fully involved in full-time teaching for many years, it wasn't until I retired that I had the time to become more involved in the community, and I became involved with Mark Barrett and the group that he was working with in the community to set up a school that was badly needed. And I worked for 3 years on that. And it was, I think, probably it was learning more about a community in Palmer's Green that comprised huge numbers of Muslim people who wanted to, and when you talk to them, you realise that we want the same things. And it was a big learning curve for me, working in that community and seeing how they really wanted to work in the same way that we did. And I became involved with Mark at that time.
So when you became involved with Mark and you met many Muslim people, is that something that made you think that what is a great thing to do is bring people together from different backgrounds in a diversified society to show what common humanity we have?
I think that was one of the big attractions, the fact that we remain isolated in our own communities and we're not really getting to know each other, to help each other, or to understand the things that we don't know about different cultures. And when you get into a situation where you are forced to learn because you don't know anything and you have to get on with it, it's quite a revelation when you realise that we were all after the same thing. We wanted a good education for our children. We wanted to work together in peace. And I was really pleased that I could see people living up to their own principles, a bit like Tony Gibson, who was actually a Quaker. So how he lived to his principles and getting people in this way working in communities with other people. So
when you sort of met Mark and you met the Muslim community and you realized the value of people, working together, where did you go from there? How did you take off and doing the things that you're doing? What did you do to carry on bringing people together?
I think it started from a conversation again with Mark and other people that we'd realised that we'd like to do something in the community. And we were talking about the isolation and how communities change. They change culturally, they change chronologically, and people just don't seem to know each other. And I started by doing a note to all my neighbours, putting it in about 100 houses and saying, would anyone like to meet up for a coffee sometime in the park? Let's have a picnic, get to know each other. And about 25 people turned up in our local park.
And were those people from different communities as well? Did
they were, yes, it was a mix of different. It was across the ages, across cultures, and older people, younger people with families, and people walking by in the park stopped to say what we were doing there, and how nice it is just to have a meeting like this to meet people and get to know your neighbours so that you knew them in the street. This was something they really enjoyed. And I think from then on, we've met once every few months. We've got another meeting coming up tomorrow. And we linked up with the group that Mark runs in Norwich, in Norfolk.
So that group is called Neighbourhood and Beyond, isn't it?
The group I run is Oakwood and Beyond.
Yeah.
Here's Kenwood Avenue and Beyond, because that's where I live.
Okay. So do you want to tell us what the Neighbourhood and Beyond project is about and what you're doing in Oakwood to further it there?
It came about because we suddenly realised that people outside our own streets, whether it was Kenwood Avenue or a street anywhere in the world, in fact, that people wanted to get together. And we linked up. I looked at several sites to see how we could link on the internet. And I think the biggest reaction I've had is through Nextdoor, when it changed over from Street Life. I've had about 15 or 20 replies of people saying, what a great idea. Can we keep in touch and get together? Which is why we've sorted a meeting tomorrow. And we're hoping that in a year's time, that was last summer, we were talking about it. We're hoping in August to join in with the Global Neighbourhood Day. It's Global Neighbours Day, and it goes across the world, and people around are joining together, having a picnic and talking to their neighbours or doing something in some way.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that because, you're doing something which is very local and very much about a sort of community in a local area, in a locality. But you were saying to me the other day that there's a global aspect to this because people are doing it across the world and therefore not just keeping it in your locality, but making your local global and the global local is also important for you as well. Is that right?
That's right, because I think that if we can get communities thinking and talking, and then we can have a much wider understanding of what's going on in the world instead of what we hear or see and not quite sure about. You get the personal perspective and you can understand what people's concerns are and how they're all, in fact, helping their neighbours already, but we don't know much about it. And I think the more people understand that there are so many more good things happening, I think we might become a happier society.
Yeah, so you're trying to get people together. You're using online sites like Nextdoor, which took over Street Life, which is a sort of website where you can find people in your local area. In my own area, in Palmer's Green, there's about 173 people on from that, and that's only a small area of Palmer's Green, so it's a very good site for finding people. Right, so you're beginning to find people, you're trying to bring them together. What do you hope to achieve? I mean, where did you go from A result to B? What would you like it to be, in the end, when you've accomplished your goal?
The fact that you really see, I think it has to take its own shape because it depends on the people who join, what they see happening for them and how they see the whole thing carrying forward. Young mums with children see something slightly different from older people in isolation, but they all agree that our neighbourhoods need bringing together in some way. So I see something like, how can we support each other? How can the older generation support the youngsters? What can the youngsters do for the older people? A bit like when I was running community service, volunteering work in schools. The sixth form would go out and help people in the community, help in the shops, charity shops, and do things to develop their skills. To me, it's all about education for life, that you never stop learning, you never stop supporting and seeing what's going on and seeing how you can make a difference.
Okay, so you're getting all this together. I mean, do you see it growing or do you see it as a small group that actually acts as a catalyst for other people to get together in different ways? Or do you see that group growing? Or do you see a way that you can work with other groups in the area, like Enfield Communities Together, Love Your Doorstep, Palmer's Green website, which they have, and the many, many others? I mean, are you trying to link those together as well?
Well, I think this is one of the big things that I've noticed by doing this, is that there are lots of different groups and that we need in some way to link together. Enfield Voices, Love Your Doorstep. They all offer a service. Some are run as a business, some are run as voluntary sites. And I think that we all have something to offer each other. But I think it's a linking up that may well prove the way forward.
Okay, well, we're coming sort of to the end of this now, but let me ask you a final question then. I mean, you've done all this and you've done it for many years now. What is it inside of you that keeps you going? What keeps you motivated to do this?
The fact that people turn around to you and say, that's a good idea, thank you for doing that. It's great, we should do more of it. And you suddenly realise that there is someone needed around to start things moving. And that if you can get something going and people see something in it, it will take on its own form and things will happen from there. Okay, well, thanks for doing that, Ros, because that was an interesting interview. It's quite clear that you're doing, an incredibly important job, and you're getting a lot of satisfaction yourself out of it, but creating satisfaction as well for other people. And thank you for doing this first interview as well that we've done on Facebook Live using this system. And we hope to do many more, and I'm sure we'll come back to you sometime later. I hope I'm running fairly regularly and do another interview, but you've given us an insight to what's motivated you and what started you doing things and the things that you're actually doing at the moment. So thank you for taking part in this, and thank you for those who are watching. And I'm sure if you haven't watched it, the recording will be on, and these videos tend to get a lot of views, so it's been worth doing. So thank you all. And we hope to see you at our next interview. And we'll finish the broadcast now. So good night for now. Okay, thanks, Francis. Thanks a lot. Be in touch.